Hi, I'm Paul W. Downs.
And I'm Lucia Aniello, and we're two of the three creators of Hacks on Max.
We're here at the IndieWire offices to talk about season 4.
A season you've obviously seen.
And if not, it's still streaming. It's there. Check it out.
I had the pleasure of talking with Adam Bricker about season 4 as well. And so I want to ask y'all the same question I asked him about that Singapore montage in episode 10. What the fuck? Why does it go so hard?
Wow, great question.
Why does it go so hard?
I would love to hear his response, which I'm sure I will.
Well, yeah, we'll hear what he had said. I think that the finale, Heaven, has a couple montages that go pretty hard. I think that the first one that starts in her bedroom that then kind of goes into the tchotchke shop. What is it?
Bonanza.
Oh, yeah, that goes into Bonanza. Is also a montage that goes really hard. And I think one thing that we employed in that sequence in particular, and I will get to Singapore in a moment, is that is the second time in the series that we are employing an in-camera zoom. Now, the first time we did it was in the Lesbian Cruise episode, the opening where she says, gays, I thought this was a gay cruise. And Margaret Cho goes, it is gay. Lesbians. And then there's an in-camera zoom that goes into Deborah's face as the honk goes. So this is the second time we employ an in-camera zoom. And that's in the Bonanza shop. And we employed that because we really wanted to have a very different feeling about Deborah. This is like a time where it's really the first time we ever see her in public, and she is just one of the people. She is not Deborah Vance in that moment. She's just another person,
an anonymous person
buying little gifts, cheap gifts, and buying herself some alcohol. And so there's a very voyeuristic sense to that sequence that I really love.
And the music in that sequence is so evocative and so good.
Yeah, it's a song by a singer named Emma Louise, but it sounds like it's a male singer because actually she made an entire album where her voice is pitched down to sound like a man. And we felt like that. I mean, the song is so haunting and beautiful in and of itself, but we felt that there was also another layer to the idea of Deborah has for so long had to make herself somebody else, hardened, and oftentimes working in, a male world. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that song also felt like it was really the right fit. And it is almost like she's built herself like into this person. And then where has that gotten her? And
I know you asked about Singapore. So the fact that we're still talking about this is probably going to be edited right out. But we'll do it for 20, 30 minutes just so you can keep it on the hard drive. But typically when I come into a director's cut of Lucia's work, I know pretty much what it is because we write in a way that's pretty visual, and we oftentimes have planned things that I'll expect to see. But that is one case where it was very different because we had actually scripted while Deborah is in bed, depressed, playing solitaire, eating cookies, which for Deborah Vance, eating cookies in bed, it's rock bottom. There were going to be a series of voicemails from Jimmy and Kayla and Randy, played by Robbie Hoffman, and Ava, just checking in on her and just all of the calls that she'd missed. But when Jen and I came in at the producer's level to watch Lucia's first director's cut, she had opted not to include those voiceovers, those voicemails. And I was so moved by that sequence. I thought it was one of my favorite things in the series. I loved that sequence so much. Now, that's saying a lot because my lines were cut. Okay, Jimmy's lines were cut for the record, but
yeah, and I did do that.
I thought it was so good. I loved it so much. So, and that's before the Singapore montage. Good God! And as you know, making a montage is so difficult because there's so many locations. There's so much crewing that you have to do to make a montage, and then oftentimes those are tiny blips. And to do that in a country where we had some of our crew from Los Angeles and some of a local crew, some crew from Bangkok that came. We had a really sort of international crew on that, but coming together and figuring it out and making it work in a very different place was also quite a feat. That was one we did have the song before we went in. We had that cover of Cranberries, which is in Mandarin, before we shot it. So I think, for me personally as a director, and Lucia directed the episode, so why is the man even talking? But for me as a director, I do like to have the music before I shoot if I can, and that doesn't always happen. You don't always have the luxury based on clearances and budget and all kinds of things, but we did have that one. But a lot of those locations we had to find once we got there, because we had written for certain things, but that had to change when we got to a place where, especially in Singapore, they have so many rules and regulations that there were certain things we couldn't do, places we couldn't go, places you could fly a drone, places you couldn't fly a drone, places you could have bare feet, places you couldn't have bare feet.
Is that true?
No, but it sounds colorful. It's fun for the soundbite, maybe.
Back to your actual question, 45, 50 minutes later, the Singapore montage, it does indeed go quite hard, as you said. It's interesting because it has moments that are so funny to me. For example, Deborah playing ball, I guess, with an inflatable ball in a pool, which is so funny to me just to see her like gabbing and palling around with her new Singaporean friends. I don't know why that makes me laugh so much. And also, moments of, when they're getting massages and Deborah puts a cucumber in her eyes, or Ava being forced to do karaoke. I really love the moment in that huge fish tank restaurant.
Oh, that was an incredible location.
But I think that the ending of it, of when Deborah's dancing by herself at the top of this incredible building, there's something so devastating about this woman dancing barefoot on a rooftop. Jean also looks magnificently gorgeous in it. So that
even though it's one of her saddest moments. I mean,
yes.
she is almost fall down drunk,
yes.
dancing alone with Ava watching concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that moment does really hit, just in the idea that like somebody who thinks they're having the best night of their life, we know the truth, her inner truth is it is a kind of a rock bottom, even if she's not willing to admit
That's the thing.
it.
She's literally on top of the world. She's in the tallest building in the city, and yet she is in her darkest moment. Even though it may not be something she fully even understands.
I love that because it's one, that moment of her dancing alone is just like transcendently beautiful. And throughout the season, in both of y'all's work, I see these moments of just sort of like visually catching the characters' interior states. And it's interesting because I feel like in season 4, there's a little bit more like close-up work on Ava and Deborah when they're fighting. I'm curious just kind of like how you guys think about pushing the visual language of the show in order to get at the characters and their dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we were in an interesting position with the idea of a late night show is, oftentimes you're experiencing the visual language of a late night show in very standard formats. You see the 2-shot, you see the single, and maybe you reverse on the crowd actually, I don't know if you really even do late night, but in any case, it's a very traditional format. And so for us, we spend so much time in the late night world, but obviously we don't really want it to feel like late night because it's not late night. It's about the stories that are taking place there. So for us to find new, fresh ways to cover those scenes was definitely a challenge. Oftentimes, the story led it. So if the scene is between, let's say, Mayor Joe and the audience, then you're talking about a lot of wide shots of the crowd and then back onto Mayor Joe and then maybe back to Deborah to scoot the scene along, versus a scene that might be versus Deborah and Ruby, Ava's ex-girlfriend, triangulated with Ava. And so that has a lot more like camera pushing in and being very frustrated with that. Like those are a lot more close shots because you're really with Ava being humiliated. But then there's other moments. We did a lot of mirroring. So for example, in A Slippery Slope, the 9th episode, there are 2 moments where we push in on Deborah and Ava in really important moments. One for Deborah when she's told, you got to get rid of Ava or the show's done. There's a profile shot that just slightly pushes in. And then when Ava is at the Oscars, and she's told there was no credentials left for you. We repeat that close-up profile shot that has a little bit of a push in. It's these big moments for both of their characters in a very pivotal scene and moment for both of them, and in, I'd say, the most pivotal episode of the scene, if not the series. So yeah, we did do a lot of mirroring of moments visually to try to underline, these are the things that really were in their interior life, as you said.
That was, I think, something that when we were making the first season, I think we found really compelling was the moments alone with the characters, partly because we have such incredible actors. I mean, watching Jean Smart behave as Deborah alone, or Hannah Einbinder as Ava behave alone is really, really compelling and remarkable, and they convey so much with so little. But this season, especially in A Slippery Slope, in that 9th episode, they are separated. I mean, they're separated by design because Deborah sort of has this MacGuffin of an assignment that gets Ava off the lot. But we see them, we see Ava panicking in the backseat of a car alone, or Deborah looking in the mirror, which she does often, and sizing up what she's done and what she's about to do. And, they give us so much in those moments. And I think in episode 9 in particular, because they have those moments to be dialogue less, even though, again, this is a comedy and jokes per minute is often the North Star, and we try and pack as many jokes as we can. We do get those moments in this series where we get to showcase really incredible acting without all those words that we write.
I feel like that's always been the case on Hacks, is you guys just have a very intuitive sense of the absolute send-up of a late-night writer's room. It gets sort of balanced out by sort of those moments of just like wordless decision. It's a good week to ask this question. What do y'all love about shooting the show in Los Angeles?
We've shot the show here since season 1, day 1. I think people, because it is based mostly in Vegas, assume that we shoot in Vegas. But I think over the last 4 seasons total, we probably shot 10, 12 days. Is that right?
Yeah.
Total for the whole series in Vegas, actually. But we love Vegas we love Vegas for so many reasons. But what we love about shooting in Los Angeles is really like the richness of the people that we get to make the show with. Our crews are the people we've been making the show with since day 1, almost all the same crew since the beginning. And we really have just such a second, like there's so much we don't even have to discuss anymore, because our operators have been on since the beginning. Charlie Panian, who is essentially our second unit director, really understands the visual language of the show. It is just something like when you get to the groove with these people, it is really what makes the show so rich, I think, is because you can feel the relationships behind the camera, honestly.
And, we made a show in New York. We worked on Broad City for 5 seasons, and it was often described as a love letter to New York. We would say more of a suicide note. But, we are, because we are transplants from New York, although we've been here now almost 20 years, redact that. We are very much Angelinos. And, we recognize the thing where people are compare Los Angeles to other cities, or sometimes there can be a bad rap, but you know what, this is where dreams are made, where people come to make their dreams, where television is made. And it's so important to us to not only represent that this season on the show, because it is set in Los Angeles for the first time, but also to advocate for more of that happening, because this is an industry town, and there should be, I said this before, but people say to us often, you're so lucky to shoot in LA. And that should not be. It shouldn't be luck that we get to shoot in the town where film and television has been made for a century. It should be a standard, and it should be something that we advocate for no matter who we are. This season also, we really do have, it's a meditation on the seismic changes in our industry and in television. And that includes why things have been moved out of the city. Why things are outsourced, and why things are done in places that are cheaper to do them. And it all comes down to corporate greed. And the fact is that, I think whether you're in the entertainment industry and care a lot about television, or you're somebody who works in food service, you know what it means to have your labor exploited and not paid. And so I think, hopefully, even though this is very much a show that this season in particular, we're not just talking about people outside of the industry who are outcast to Las Vegas. We're talking about people that are at the top of their game. Deborah Vance becomes the #1 late night host in her time slot. But we're also talking about the changes and what's happened to our industry that really it's happening to everyone, in late stage capitalism. And I know that sounds heady as hell, but it's true.
The moment that I knew I was sort of in good hands in terms of the realism of dealing with sort of the headwinds against late night was Winnie's obsession with carpool karaoke. I was like, yes. And I would be curious to hear from y'all a little bit about, does making the show too contemporary date it, like how the fine art of the celebrity cameo and like how much and how little to include. I'm curious how you thought about including Hollywood in the fiction. Is there a point at which it breaks?
Yeah, I think we think about that a lot because we never want the show to be too dated, to be too set in a specific time. You know, we try and keep, and it was easier to do, I would say, when it was about this Vegas stand-up who was fighting for dignity and taking her show on the road and losing dates. It was easier to make it sort of perennial and not feel like it was about one particular time. And even though we have a show about a stand-up comedian and a comedy writer, so their references are going to be contemporary cultural references, right? They are going to talk about celebrities. They are going to talk about things that are going on. But we try and keep it, you know, oftentimes when we are talking about cameos, we think about people like Carrot Top. And, you know, we think about people who have been around for a long time. Carol Burnett this season is an absolute living legend. You know, people that you could have on and hopefully honestly transcend the time period in which the show is made. But you're right. I do think that in talking about late night, we also want it to be real. I mean, the show is a grounded comedy, even though it's a hard comedy. And we use that character, I hope, to showcase not just what it's like, what the headwinds are, as you said, facing people that make any television, much less late night television, but also to represent the people on the business side who do have good intentions. Because even though that was absolutely a thorn in the side of Deborah and Ava, it was something that would supplement the budget of making that show. And so I think Winnie's heart was in the right place, even though it seemed like a trivial corporate mandate to someone like Deborah Vance, who just wants to make people laugh.
The question is really, can that show exist anymore? Just to want to make a good show that makes people laugh. And it turned out not so much. And so she really had to start to play with the format, the idea that the show would be airing the next day and they would make cliffhangers and that's the only way to get people to watch. Like, I think our point was a little bit like she was, you know, the glass cliff is real for her. She was only given the job once the job felt a little bit outdated and impossible to succeed at. And so she still did the Deborah Vance thing, which is figure out a way to make it work for her. And whether or not that would succeed today, I don't know. I do think that that's an interesting idea to try to make. I mean, I feel like John Mulaney does a little bit of that with his show, which feels like a more of an event thing. Mm-hmm. And though I will say, I think we came up with it before that show existed. But in any case, I do feel like there is a world where it's like this show could not really succeed as it is. But Deborah Vance always does have a trick up her sleeve, a card up her sleeve. Vegas.
An ace, even. Yeah, absolutely. Which is all the more impressive that she's in episode 4 sort of psyched out and gets stage fright for the first time. Paul, I'm curious if you could talk about sort of making a stage uncomfortable for Deborah Vance.
That was a really difficult sequence. That one and also the follow-up, because it turns out that it's a dress rehearsal. Though the audience doesn't know that when they're first watching her sort of have this panic attack. But it was, I mean, obviously it's easy to have Jean Smart play panicked. I mean, she did a brilliant job and she made it work, but there's a lot of sound design that goes into it, particularly in the actual first episode when she's, you know, walking on the stage and we're hearing her heartbeat in the mic. And then we decided in that sequence to also take out the crowd. We've heard the crowd a lot, but we kind of just have score. We're kind of in her head. It's almost like it's underwater. And the sound design really helps sell, I think, what it feels like to almost be in a moment you can't take in, to be almost overwhelmed by having your dream come true, but it being such high stakes. Because for someone like Deborah, being the first woman at 11:30 on one of the major networks, it means so much to all of the women and girls after her. And so I think it makes total sense why this would be the highest pressure situation for a performer like Deborah Vance ever. But we also talked about her disharmony with Ava making it even worse. The fact that she couldn't look to somebody who she's feeling great about because they have tension at this moment. It's almost like Dumbo's feather. She doesn't have that thing which could get her through nerves otherwise. And so it's only when she takes Carol Burnett's advice and just focuses on her friend that she's able to get through it.
And it makes me curious at this point, you know, 4 seasons in, what are the big challenges in post? What are you mostly trying to solve for there?
The challenge in post is always time. It really is. You know, we do like to watch pretty much every take of everything. And that is always going to be the thing we like to do. I mean, sometimes we remember exactly what we want. We remember what take. I sometimes be like the third take. And sometimes it's been so long because we may have shot it in October or something, and then we're not editing that episode again till January or February. So you kind of remember, but you don't totally remember. And you had marked stuff, the script supervisor. But so in any case, it's like, I think it's always about time and wanting more time. And we always say it's the edit's not done. It's just abandoned. But I think, like Paul said earlier, we're not really people who find it in the edit for the most part. I think we really know what we want. For us, it's really just about, is that the best performance? Is that the best take? Is that the best, and for us, it's a very time consuming thing. We have very patient editors and very patient assistant editors who luckily will do string outs for us. But sometimes we're like, well, what was in between the string outs? Like were there little moments that weren't logged on the script thing or whatever it is?
We have used moments where we haven't actually said action, it's just before, it's the pre-roll, just to have a look or to have a moment.
Yes.
But yeah, like Lucia said, because I'm obviously an actor on the show, but the show is about a performer. It's about the stand-up comedian. And so we really, and also, Lucia is a performer. Jen is a performer. We all came from making alt comedy, performing it, writing it, shooting digital shorts and editing them ourselves. So we do come at it from performance. We really want the performance to be just right, especially when it comes to comedic moments. We not only watch every take, we often audition them in the sequence.
Oh yeah.
So we'll watch, if there's 5 takes, we'll watch all 5 takes in the sequence of the other actors to see what alchemy is correct.
Because sometimes you'll just watch them all in a row, but you actually don't know which is the best one until, like Paul's saying, you see it in the sequence. So sometimes it can just be time consuming and time, you got to finish the show at some point.
The other challenge I find in post is, well, sometimes it's the song, sometimes it's finding the right song for something, or working with our composers to write a piece of score. But what's interesting too, we now sound mix on the stage and we listen to it on the stage. But then when we do our review of the sound mix after notes are given, we go to a different environment and listen to it on television speakers. We try and listen to things and watch things both from a color grade and a sound design standpoint in as many environments as we can, because they're so different device to device. And we really, it's a comedy and it's about the jokes, but we also are filmmakers and we want it to feel cinematic and to look a certain way and to feel a certain way. And so we try and make that the best it can be because it's so different. And that is a challenge because even the way it's delivered to the platform and the way the platform puts it out, where it balances dialogue and music
a bit.
It's so interesting. And we are hyper exacting about some of that
So
stuff.
then you're like, okay, well, we're in 5-1, it sounds like this. On left to right, it sounds like this. On the computer, it sounds like this. And then we're like, we literally are like, what brands of televisions do most people have and watch it from? And then we're like, what is most likely, what is the out of the box color grade that people put on it? And then we want to make it as good as possible for the most amount of people. But then you're also like, well, don't you want to reward the people who put the time into having a 5-1 speaker system in their house? And then it's like, it just gets very complicated because you're like, well, then who are we making it for? But we are like thinking about those things so much.
And just as a public service announcement, if anyone has the Samsung Frame TV, which can look like a piece of art on your wall, and
very popular.
We happen to have it. It comes in a mode that's dynamic, which is very electric, so that the art works. Please, dear listener, go into your settings and change display to movie mode. It's either movie or filmmaker mode. I beg of you, because it will make every show look different and better. And all of our fellow TV and movie makers will be so happy that you did. So please do that if you have the Frame.
This is the duty of every millennial when you go home for the holidays.
Help your parents.
Help
I know.
Exactly.
They're seeing electrically white teeth. They're seeing crazy teeth.
They're saying, why they put so much makeup on them? It's not supposed to look like that.
It's seeing crazy stuff.
You can't solve for every variable. And so to find that middle ground, thank you for
lecturing
going crazy on that. Yeah, because the show looks great.
Sounds like you have really good settings on your television.
Yeah.
I do have good settings on my television. I want to ask a little bit about Deborah and Ava's dynamic in season 4, because you guys are pretty fearless with the level of conflict that they have, and then starting from that point, and bringing them to where they are in Deborah's suite at the end of episode 10 is like a huge task and could conceivably take much longer than 10 episodes. So I would just love to hear you guys talk about how you guys wanted to pace their relationship this year.
Listen, the show, of course, is a comedy, but we also want to always be truthful and really honest. And I think the thing that was, we talked about endlessly was really the level of conflict between them for the majority of the season. And as much as people love people getting along and being friends, we also felt it was important to be honest to the situation, which is that they would be feuding both because of the betrayal of the blackmail and also because Ava's still very upset that the job was taken away from her. But also, they're, even if they weren't feuding interpersonally, they have very different perspectives on how the show would work. And that would have them fighting anyway. I think
Not to mention all the downward pressure from the network and all of the other, stressors.
It's a pressure cooker. And I think we wanted to underline the idea that it's a pressure cooker, but it's especially hard to do if you don't have the relationships and the friendship behind it. And they don't have that for the first 5 episodes really into the middle of towards the end of the 6th episode. But we also felt that we needed to earn their reunion. And we felt that the only way to earn a reunion, however long it lasts, was to have it hit rock bottom. And we didn't feel like the betrayal was rock bottom. We felt like that was a launching point to see how far they could go. And so for them, the rock bottom for Ava is obviously Mrs. Table. And her explosion there. But I think also, she is very hurt by the fact that Deborah mines her personal life for that story very publicly. And I think it takes Deborah really realizing that Ava might be gone. She's had some kind of psychiatric break. And that I think the moment where she sees the photo that was in Ava's desk, which is a photo that Ava stole season 1 from the comedy club in $1.69 million, to realize that this girl has always had her back and she's been dogging her a little too hard and that she really needs her. And she needs her for the show, but she needs her as her friend and as her collaborator. And so for us, you said that it was fearless in the way that we portrayed that
Thank you.
that grist, I guess we'd say. And I think that we felt that we could do that if you had some life rafts along the way. We felt like episode 4, Deborah realizing that she really needed Ava to finish that first episode. We felt that there were enough life rafts that hopefully kept the audience engaged. And I could totally see how some people felt that it was too long for them. And that's really, I think, about how invested are you in these characters and how real do you want the show to be? This is a show where we really try to honor how we think and feel people really behave. And so it would be very lovely to just have them be friends again quickly, but it just didn't feel real to us.
And don't forget, when they are friends, they were both on the same page, I would say, in season 3. They were in harmony, and yet the grist is the show. That is the magic of the show. Their ribbing each other is their love language. It's some of the most fun stuff to write, and I think the most fun stuff for Gene and Hannah to perform. So to me, I'm like, the grist is inherent to the show. And you're right, we did stretch that rubber band a lot this year, but it's so that we could go further. It doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. And I think getting to do it at a different level and in a different mode keeps the variety in there and keeps the spice there and keeps it's a passionate season. These women are passionate because they're living out their dream. And I love that.
I loved the sort of incorporation of some of our Vegas stalwarts into the world of late night. And I wondered if y'all could talk a little bit about Mayor Joe riding a Zamboni into glory and the hockey music cue and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor Joe, Lauren Weedman, is somebody we've loved. We cast her as fans. I guess she auditioned, but
I think she did audition, but we loved her. She is so funny and so unique.
I'm going to name 2 things that I've always loved her. She's great in Looking, the HBO series by Andrew Hay. And also she's great in 5 Year Engagement, where she plays Chris Pratt's boss.
And she's great in Hung, another HBO. Yes. She's been in the HBO family multiple times.
And she's in Hung with
Jane Addams, who plays
co-workers.
Nina, Ava's mom.
So check out Hung on our favorite platform, Max, when you get a chance. A great show. But yeah, Lauren we've loved forever. And, she makes a quick cameo in the Las Vegas episode. What happens in Vegas, but we really wanted to play with the idea of Deborah wanting to use late night as redemption for other people. And so that's what that episode gave us an opportunity to do.
Yeah, we could have invented a character or a celebrity that was maligned, but it felt like it feels always really rewarding to us when we get to engage our ensemble, and what a perfect person for it. Not only the actress Lauren Weedman, but also the mayor of Las Vegas. I could see getting into trouble and being a person that Deborah would have on, which is good for the show. It makes good TV. So it was kind of a perfect storm of and same is true, I think, with Poppy Lou, who plays Kiki. When they have Celebrity Strip Poker become like a segment on the show, I'm like, that would work. That would be a successful late night segment. And how perfect to have Kiki sort of run the table because she comes from Deborah's life. It's when the show gets more personal for Deborah that it starts to work more. And it's really nice for us to use the ensemble because we have such great actors. Not only the ones that are in Vegas, but the ones that are in LA too.
Damien and his quest for bear piss all season. Incredible.
What an arc.
What an arc.
What an
First, you
arc.
learn his last name, Asado Agosto, and then you find out that he needs that bear piss bad. He finds a proprietary blend.
I mean, that was a great thing too, for someone like Mark, we got to put him, when Deborah and Ava are at odds and Deborah and Ava won't have dinner together, Damien is her de facto date. And to see him so nervous, sweating, and uncomfortable to be there, to be there with your boss. And also, let's not forget, he's a Jehovah's Witness. He's never drank before. So to get drunk for the first time with Deborah Vance, that was a very rich area, we thought. And Mark is so funny and so great and always nails it. So we were glad to have like extra screen time with him. Yeah, we really try and, incorporate the ensemble as much as we can. It is a half-hour comedy, so sometimes it's hard to really get everybody in a story because there's not an ABCD story, but we do our best.
Well, y'all, thank you for talking to me today. I really appreciate it, and for a very entertaining, very passionate season 4.
Thank you
So much.